Hey, I'm Todd. Thanks for choosing to watch my video, and if you would subscribe it, like it, all that stuff, that'd be great. Otherwise, enjoy the video, and I hope it gives you the information you need and is helpful to you. Take care. Hey, we're looking at a 2015 Subaru Outback, looking at replacing the rear brake pads and rotors. It's funny, I'm now doing back-to-back Subarus one day after another. So it's interesting. I did it according to the Subaru way with the scan tool to retract the electronic brake, e-brake on the calipers. So you use a scan tool, it retracts it, then you can collapse the piston. No problem, it just pushes straight in electronically. So I think I'm going to tackle this other ways, so you can unbolt this, because if you buy this from Subaru, you actually get this separate from this. It doesn't actually come as one piece. When you take this off, no fluid's not going to be pouring out of it, so you're okay there. But right now at this moment it might be a little jumbled, but let's start from the beginning. Take the wheels off once it's off the ground. 5 19mm lug nuts, and you have 2 caps here protecting these. There's a little buildup on here of corrosion, dirt, debris, so I think you always want to take these out. And they were a 7mm Allen head, and so those are on the back side, capped here, a cap on each side. So we're taking those out, then we get the bolts out, and just kind of push it with your finger to get the bolt out the rest of the way. And then also what I chose to do was take off a 12mm bolt here for freedom from our hose. They don't want it to dangle, they say, but brake hoses take what? Thousands of pounds of pressure when you're stepping on the brake sometimes. I'll still zip tie it up maybe, but I don't feel bad. There's no kinks or anything crazy going on there, so there's that. 12mm bolt holding that makes it easier to take the caliper off. Now, brake pads. I saw a video talking about it doesn't matter which side these go on, but if you look at it, these have got little nubs on them. You can see from the circle on the inside, the nubs are not getting hit by the caliper piston. But if you look at this pad, there's a nub right here. Now that nub is probably going to be hit by the caliper piston unless you perfectly line up the 2 little nubs there. So if you want to throw them anywhere you want, you can, but make sure that nubby's in the right spot to fit on that. Otherwise you might have a little wear issue with the piston pushing at an angle if it rides on this nub. So I'd put them in like this. This is the second Subaru I've done, and they both are the same with the springs on the inside, nothing on the outside. Little detail there. Then we have 8 by 1.25 bolts you can screw in here to force the rotor off. Otherwise, of course, tapping with a hammer works okay. So maybe a little pause here, and I'm going to take these off, of course, easy peasy. And I'm going to set up my tripod and shoot the caliper. My 8 by 1.25 bolt in there, maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches long. You could use 2 bolts, but just one back and forth is fine and dandy. Alright, so let's see about just compressing this. I've never done it before. We'll see how it goes. We're going to use a special tool to turn this in. See if we can do it that way. So we've got this tool kit, has little nubs on it, fit in the slots on the piston, and then we're just going to go about turning this and turning the piston and making it go in. That's the plan. So we're just applying light pressure as we go on this. If I was turning too hard, this would not turn. So it's bottomed out, it feels like. So we're going to take this off. But then we're going to line up those two little indentations and make sure they're perpendicular. Looking pretty good right there. So that is one way to collapse your pistons on your Subaru. Using a 5mm Allen wrench, take out the two screws for the emergency brake. Keys off out of the ignition. Emergency brake is not on. We know the emergency brake is not on because the wheel turns. Just a little toothed female star end, I guess I'd call it. And there's the other end. They want you to reuse the O-ring, but it feels pretty darn nice on here. I might just wipe it down. Maybe a little silicone on it is all. So I'm going to turn this counterclockwise, they say, to draw in the emergency brake, the piston assembly. All right, so I'm going to use a screwdriver. Use a screwdriver in here to try and collapse the piston while I'm turning it counterclockwise. Of course, on the camera side, it's clockwise, but if you're out on the wheel side, it's counterclockwise. So how about that? So I went until it stopped, and then I collapsed the piston with my screwdriver because this just stopped, and I'm going to lubricate that. So there we go. Little silicone spray. Boom. Just like that. I can torque those two bolts down to 5.9 foot-pounds. So not very tight. Alright, now our caliper is collapsed and we can replace our brakes like that. Then we'll put our rotor on, caliper on. Kind of see the wear spots on here where the brake pads are riding. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up with a brush. I'm going to use a wire wheel. I'm going to clean up these two. It's always a good idea. I've seen videos where they don't seem to take this apart. They take the caliper and the bracket off together and just slap pads in there, but over time these can just get built up with gunk or debris and seize up, so let's prevent that. There's actually a couple spots on the caliper too, so I hit those up right here and here. We're looking pretty clean. I'm going to run some caliper lubricant through these holes as well. Wipe off the excess. We don't want, if we can help it, we don't want lubricant on the rotors or the pads. I've also taken my needle nose pliers and turned these. You're just pushing in and turning clockwise. And that can also be done. It just kind of depends on making the video, depends on what kind of special tools you may or may not have available to yourself. Alright, since this is stuck on, we can take a little sandpaper or wire brush if you have it. We'll clean this up a little bit, maybe help the rotor from sticking next time. A little anti-seize if you want. Put the nut on there just to help the rotor from flopping around too much. So usually there's a coating for rust prevention, so go ahead and wash both sides where the brake pad rides on. Just wash the whole thing with warm soap and water. Towel dry it, you'll be good to go. Put the caliper, or put the rotor on, then we'll mount the caliper on next. We'll torque those down to about 48 foot-pounds. Got our new brake pads. Again, no bumps in the middle, right, to interfere with the piston. Put a little lubricant on the places where it's probably going to touch the bracket and the caliper. I did bungee cord it out of the way because it just made it easier to work on. Slides on pretty nice. Got our 2 cleaned up bolts. You want to start these by hand because we don't want to be stripping threads. So make sure they're started 4 or 5 turns. Torque these at about 18 foot-pounds. Oh, I kind of forgot about the spring here. Not too bad though. Just use a screwdriver to pop it out. A little strength to, I like to get it started in the hole and then force this around the edge is what I like to do. Just use a screwdriver and pry it out. Make sure that both fingers are actually pushing down the caliper and one's not poked out. So that should be awesome for your rear brakes on your Subaru Outback, and probably most every Subaru with the rear electronics. Outback, Legacy, maybe WRX. Put little caps back on here. Put my 12mm bolt back in for the hose. Probably about 88, 89 foot-pounds for the lug nuts. Put them on in a crisscross pattern as tight as you can. Lower the vehicle to the ground. Nice pinch weld here. Or if you can get a jack deep enough, you can put it underneath here and jack up both sides. At the same time, use safety stands, protect yourself. And there you go. Bob's your uncle. All right, we got our wheels in, tightened down to like 88.8 foot-pounds, something like that. We'll get in here and push on the brakes a few times to set the calipers and the brake fluid level. Feels pretty good. 7 or 8 times. And we'll get out, check our fluid level. Maximum right there. We're right below the maximum. I feel okay with it. Taking the cap off, putting the cap on. Dot 3 brake fluid. So that's it right there. Brake pedal's pushed. Then they want us to activate the emergency brake, I think 4 or 5 times. Let's go ahead and do that to maybe set that. Keys on. We're gonna activate this. I think. There we go. There's 1. Off. Got my foot on the brake. You can feel it moving. 2. 3. 4. I'm good with 4. I'm gonna go check the wheels. This one is the driver's side. I unbolted the actuator. This side, I turned it in using the brake tool and then collapsed it. So they're both working. Very good. That is replacing your rear brake pads, rotors on your 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019 Subarus, Outback, and other models, probably Legacy, with electronic rear emergency brakes.